Hey everyone, welcome to Culture Wedge. Now, I know what you're thinking. Why in the world am I so dressed up? Why did Brandon decide to wear a tie for this? Well, none of your business. Now, the next thing that you're thinking is, why in the world is this show called Culture Wedge? Well, I'll tell you. It's because people like me and you are trying our best to be those who bring common sense, conservatism, and even Christianity back in today's culture. So we are the wedge being driven into today's culture, trying to put a crack and separate it to bring those three attributes, those three C's, back into today's culture. So we're going to be talking about one thing that is maybe the most obvious and the most insidious in today's culture. And what happened on Monday with the shooter in Boulder is maybe the most obvious example of this problem. So what we know happened with the shooter in Boulder was he went into a supermarket and, shot up the place. Now, the rough preliminary photos of the guy admittedly made him look white, but it wasn't something we knew for sure. However, people went to the House of Worship for Wokeism Twitter and posted some things like this. Here's one that says, extremely tired of people's lives depending on whether a white man with an AR-15 is having a good day or not. And someone added on to that, it's always an angry white man, always. Here's another, call it what it is, white supremacist domestic terrorism. Here's another, America has a white male terrorist problem. They're shooting up schools, concerts, malls, churches, and spas. America has a white male terrorist problem. And more, and more, and more. This is on notthebee.com, the only ones who are brave enough to keep this kind of stuff on their website. Thank you so much to Seth Dillon. Now, whenever we move on a little bit to actually the next day, for some reason it took that long to identify the shooter, what we see is, it turns out he's not white. So looking on Fox News, we see that the shooter's name is Ahmad Al-Aliwi Alisa, and I'm pretty sure I'm saying that wrong, but I really don't care. But it turns out he is a Muslim man. He's been living in the U.S. most of his life, but he is in fact not a white man. He is Arab. He's had trouble most of his life and being seen as a somewhat scary person. He did come to the supermarket with a AR-15, I believe an AR-15, and he was quite unfond of Donald Trump. In one tweet, he said Trump is a D, and he's also said things like speaking out against those who are against Muslims. I can't find the quotes right here in front of me. I'm looking on Fox News. But nevertheless, this guy is not who people thought he was. So before we had any of this information, before we knew exactly who he was, people had their opinion of the guy. And taking into account what happened in Atlanta, maybe it's a little understandable. But they go the next step by saying that it's always a white man. It's white domestic terrorism. It's a white man with an AR-15 that always causes the problems. So let's think back to the past, or maybe the not so distant past, to be honest. Whenever someone tends to blame a certain race of people for all their problems, for the big events, the big mass shootings, for the big catastrophes in their country, in their society, what does that sound like? Sounds like somebody I knew about 80, 90 years ago. But I won't say who. let's just move on. You can see where I'm getting at here. This is a trend that has started coming up more and more and more as soon as the anti-racism narrative really took off with the death of George Floyd and the beginning of the BLM riots. Ever since then, we have saw the rise of things like segregation in universities and in certain towns. California actually proposed a proposition that would reveal a civil rights act that they passed in the 90s. Unfortunately, it was voted down in the election last year, but by a slightly narrow margin. So we see what's happening here. People are literally wanting to erase what took place during the Civil Rights Act with Martin Luther King Jr. Because in their minds, what they're doing here is providing a service for minorities. But when in fact their anti-racism narrative may be doing more the opposite. It seems like perhaps what's happening with this woke movement is that white supremacists have hijacked the movement. And now there are things like white affinity groups in certain schools, which on the face of it may sound like a good thing until you realize studying your own race and seeing how it's different from the other races around you and in the world doesn't necessarily create a mindset of equality, does it? I think y'all can see where I'm going with this. Now, what we need to do as people with common sense, maybe you're conservative, and maybe if I'm really getting through to you, you're Christian. How do we approach problems like this? How can we help to solve problems like this? Well, number one on our list of 3 C's is common sense. America has had a problem with racism. In the past, not so long ago, we went through the civil rights movement, and even past then, there was still trouble with racism in the United States. But we've grown since then. America is much less racist than many of the countries in the world, and you don't have to travel far to see that. So we, as people with common sense, first off, know that we shouldn't be racist. We know that God created us all equally. We were all made in His image, and therefore we are not supposed to treat our own race or any other as somehow inherently better than the other. That's common sense. From the conservative perspective, it's very much the same. We struggle, once again, with stereotypes and prejudices that have been passed down from generation to generation. But as we keep growing, we begin to understand more and more that all people are alike. And we want to approach things from a nationalist perspective. Instead of identifying ourselves as black, white, Asian, whatever, we are in fact Americans. Maybe even we're Christians first, then Americans. So let's take things from that perspective as conservatives with common sense. And then what about Christians? Well, I've already said the obvious part. We're all created equal by God, the creator of all people and all things. God made us all in His image. We all are offered salvation through Him to every person, no matter what race, no matter what nation you're from. You can choose to accept it or reject it. So, obviously, racism has no place in today's society. However, once again, there seems to be a strange push for it from the opposite side of the aisle, if you know what I mean. So that's our common sense take on racism, on what we see from pushing for equity, as they would like to say it, or just anti-racism, which take some time to think about what in the world does that mean in the first place, anti-racism? So nevertheless, we know through examples that we saw, just like with the shooter in Colorado, there is some discrimination. There's begun a new rise of prejudice within today's culture. And we've got to try our hardest to be that wedge that drives into this new narrative by trying our best to break things up with common sense, maybe a little conservatism, maybe a little Christianity, to try to change our culture for the better. Otherwise, it will continue to get worse, and we'll end up worse than we were before the Civil Rights Act in 1964. I'm going to leave that there. There is one more thing I want to comment on, and it happened recently. I'm filming this on a Sunday, hence why I'm dressed this way. A rapper who I will not name has come out with a song, a music video, where he is giving a person dressed as Satan or the devil a suggestive dance. I won't say what it is because I don't know who exactly is watching. Also, supposedly, he did a collaboration with Nike to make 666 pairs of shoes which contain a drop of human blood. Luke 10:18 is sketched on the side, and a few other things that are quite interesting about it. Now, first off, Nike didn't collab with this guy on these shoes. There is a company who takes original Nike shoes and will after stitch things on them and really add whatever you want, and then go and let the person sell them again for a ridiculous price and in whatever limited edition. Now, it may turn out that I'm wrong on this, but I'm fairly sure that this is the truth. Also, I don't actually know if there's a drop of blood in it. I've heard that that's total BS. And to be honest, the whole thing with the shoes sounds like total BS. But with this whole thing, let me give you a piece of advice, a piece of knowledge and a piece of advice. This rapper did this for publicity, as a chance to get more notoriety and in turn make more money. We've seen stuff like this in the past, and people will go to extreme lengths to get more publicity in order to make more money. Inevitably, people will buy these shoes just because they're famous. Please, as people with common sense, ignore this person. Don't post on social media about it. Don't post pictures of the shoes. Don't give it two thoughts. It is awful. It is disgusting. But do not give this rapper a second thought, because he is not deserving of it. That's what he wants, and don't let him have it. I know I'm speaking about it right now, giving him publicity that he wants, but I'm trying to get you to try your best to ignore it. Many people have already posted a whole lot, made videos about it, but that's just what the guy wants. Ignore it, please. I know it's hard. Talk about it amongst yourselves, but don't let this guy be famous over this total crap. So thank y'all for watching today, Culture Wedge. I hope you're looking forward to more shows. This was a relatively simple one, but a big topic I wanted to address. As you may have noticed, my co-host is not with me, Chris Harley. He's out of town this weekend, but next weekend, our show should include the full set and the full set of hosts as well. So I hope y'all enjoyed this. Things will be improving over time. And so remember, try your best to change culture and use your voice before you lose it. Thanks for watching.